Hi, everyone. Welcome back to In Her Wallet, a weekly podcast helping women around the world take control of their finances for good and build better financial futures, one episode at a time. My name is Sofiia. I am your host, creator behind In Her Wallet, and an accredited investment representative here in Canada. Today, we are talking about investing in real estate, a topic we have yet to cover on the In Her Wallet podcast, and an area that, frankly, I do not have a lot of expertise in. And for that reason, the guest that is joining me today, Victoria Cluney, she has over 18 years of experience investing in real estate. She has a significant portfolio in the US and in Canada. Victoria has served for over 22 years in Canadian Armed Forces. And during that time, as she was relocating from one place to another, she was slowly starting to build her investment portfolio without really having any background knowledge in real estate. So she figured it all out on her own, which is very impressive. So she's sharing a lot of actionable and tangible advice in this episode. It will be great for anyone who is just starting to learn about real estate investing, or for anyone who is seriously considering making that first step and buying their first investment property. If you like Victoria, make sure to check out the resources I have linked in the episode description. And a friendly reminder also, if you like this episode and if you support the mission of In Her Wallet podcast, there are several ways to support the show. First one is obviously leaving a 5-star review, following the show, and sharing it with your family and friends. It helps us grow and reach new audiences. Or you can also support us through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the episode description. Well, with that out of the way, Victoria, welcome to In Her Wallet. We are so excited to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And it's lovely to, this is, I guess, the second time we've met, but feels like we're going to go more in depth today. So I'm looking forward to the chat.
Me too, I'm very excited. And we've actually never had an episode about real estate investing. So this is
Honored.
the first time we're bringing this topic to the platform. And I'm very excited to dive in. But before we do that, usually with every guest, I do an icebreaker, a series of three easy questions so our community can get to know you better. So tell me, what's your go to coffee order?
So boring. It's just black coffee in the
Black coffee.
morning. But I will say right now in my cup is a special treat. I'm drinking Fairlife chocolate protein shake with espresso. So
Oh,
it's convenient. I
wow.
have something different right now.
I like that.
Yeah.
And what's the movie you can rewatch again and again?
There isn't a movie I can rewatch again and again. I'm just like a one and done with movies. But the last movie that I watched, I think, was Top Gun at the theaters, and it was phenomenal. So I think I could see that one more time, but then that's it.
The one I would recommend you watch, the one that me and my fiance just finished watching, is Hijack on Apple TV.
Okay.
It's a series, so they have about, I think, 7 or 8 episodes. It's the one movie I am absolutely glued to the screen for.
Okay,
So,
amazing. I'm going
really
to write
good.
that down and check it out. I appreciate that.
Yes. And my final question is, if you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would that be?
It's very on brand, but I'm going to say Costa Rica because it's excellent for real estate right now. And, one of my end goals is to have that waterfront beach side property.
I love it. So, this is a
Hmm.
perfect entryway into our
Hmm.
conversation. Victoria, for those folks who have not heard of you or don't know what you do, could you give us a bit of an intro?
I am layered. I'm very layered, but most people know me as a real estate investor. And I really focus on helping educate people on real estate, investing in creative ways, in ways that fit, like, not only just like what the herd is doing, but your lifestyle and your future goals. I share a lot of my ups, my downs, journey along the way. But as you start to peel back the layers, I've been in the military for 22 years. And so I really identify with that type of personality and style and the discipline and the leadership that I can bring that has been developed throughout my time. And I'm still employed with the Canadian Armed Forces I just finished my master's of organizational psychology. I had my thesis defense not too long ago. So I bring a lot of psychology and that behavioral side of real estate investing, and I think that's why it's been such a good fit for me, because you bring the style from leadership to be able to go into these tough situations and negotiations and management of teams, but then also understanding human behavior. It's key, it's vital in real estate investing, because we are such a people centric organization and industry, and it's not just about the houses, it's about the relationships.
I'm so impressed. I've never talked to someone who is connected to the military here in Canada.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So, I mean, I didn't know that fact about you. That's
Okay.
a very fun fact. And I mean, another thing I wanted to say, and I told you that when we first had a call, you said you've been employed with the military for 22 years. You look
That's
like you're
right.
22 years.
I
So
appreciate that.
I'm sure that's what a lot of the women in our audience will think about.
It, it's, I think maybe the secret is just like following what makes you happy, because I wake up really happy and it shows, I think.
Yes, I agree with you. How did real estate come into your life?
It really evolved from the military, and because I joined when I was 18, so I mean, I've been in 22 years, and so people can do the math on how old I am, but it started because in the military, like right away, you get moved around frequently, and I just decided that I was going to buy a house very early on, and it was because of that first posting that I had to Nova Scotia from Ontario that I went right into purchasing a property. And then within about a year, I decided to sell that property and then purchase another bigger one. I felt like I'd outgrown it. And I made some good returns. So at the time that I got started, I wasn't being intentional. I didn't know what I was doing. And I just thought that I was buying a house to live in. And then realizing that I could actually make money selling that property, I started to get a little bit more strategic, and I did that twice in a row. And then I decided to buy a bungalow that I was going to live in. But 3 months later, I got posted to the United States. And at that time, I think it was about 2007, 6 or 7, when I got that posting, the market is almost similar to where we are right now. So it wasn't very easy to sell a property quick, and I would have lost a lot of money. And that's where I started to be a landlord. So I decided to get tenants. I figured out, okay, what my expenses would be. I just wanted to break even. That was my goal, because I just didn't want to lose money. And then I went to the US, and I had my friends, no social media at this time. So my friends are emailing me. There's no texting either. We're all just emailing each other. And it'd be funny if I looked back and like found these emails, but checking up on the property and trying to be, a landlord, because I wouldn't even have considered property management. I was just figuring it out, and I was a kid. Flash forward to when I was posted back to Canada, it was only about a year later. I didn't have the heart to ask the tenants to leave because they were a new family. And so that's when my, income property, and I started duplicating my properties. I purchased a condo, and then from there it just kind of blossomed because I started getting the itch.
I mean, the fact that you started figuring it out all on your
Mhm.
own without really having any knowledge of foundation, or like some people take knowledge from their parents, you figured it all
Absolutely.
out on your own. So, I mean, I applaud you for that. I think
Thanks.
this is a great entryway into me asking you, what is real estate investing? Because really, I think today we're going to talk the basics, kind of that ultimate guide for beginners. So, how can we define real estate investing?
I think the best way to define real estate investing would really be to, making profit on properties, as like the most basic ways. But there's so many different avenues that you can take with real estate investing. And so it's about accumulating an asset, or putting your money into an asset for returns, would
Hmm.
be, I think, how I would describe it. And those assets change, and the types of strategies that you use change. And so if you compare it to the stock market, where there's a ton of different stock options that you could choose to invest in, the same as with real estate, and the returns are different. The time commitment, the knowledge, the skills required is very different, which is why it can be quite daunting for somebody starting out.
Victoria, with real estate investing, I understand it's similar to stock market investing. You can make money either actively or passively. So, could you give us a few examples of how that works in your world?
Absolutely. And there is a distinction between the active and the passive investor. However, it's a big misconception that people have that real estate investing is a passive strategy. It's typically quite active. So even if you have a property manager and they're the ones that are dealing with the tenants and dealing with all the issues, you still have to manage that property manager at the end of the day. But if, just to break it down, an active investor would be the person that would be the one finding the deal, the one who is negotiating the deal, putting it under contract, who's doing all of the checks and the due diligence, we call it, to make sure the property is a good, sound investment. And then they'd be the ones that would be taking care of the property or managing the property managers. It's quite time consuming, and a lot of knowledge and skills would be required to do this effectively. The passive side of investing really could be the person who has the money at the end of the day, who may not have the time, the knowledge, the skills. There's lots of people out there that have funds to invest in real estate, but do not have the time or, interest even to manage these types of properties. So they'll find an active investor who can do all of the work. And so that active investor trades their time for money, and then the passive investor trades their money for time.
That's a very good way to put it. I want to take it back to the time when you started real estate investing, and especially the time when you had that rental building in the US. You still had that full time job on your hands, yet
Hmm.
you were, from what I understand, able to also take on that those landlord duties. So, is it for me correct to assume that even if you are taking that active approach when you are the one who is looking for a deal, who is signing the contracts, making all the checks, managing people who are renting from you, if that's the route you're going, can you still balance that off with a full time job?
Yes, I mean, absolutely, you can. You have to be able to put systems in place, and everybody's work capacity is different. Everybody's job requirements are different. For somebody like me, I wake up at 5 in the morning every day, and I can get a lot of work done before most people are even waking up. And the same with
Mhm.
after hours and weekends. So I'm able to manage my time quite effectively. And I've also developed a team at this point, so I have people that are supporting me and being able to get some of the more um, less technical things that would be required. However, when I did start out, it was slow and steady. And I started with one property and really start that way. A lot of people want to hit the ground running, which can be very dangerous with real estate investing. So if you start out with one property and find out how does it fit your lifestyle, and that is important too with the type of property that you're investing in. For example, if you were to do a short term rental or a vacation property and you wanted to manage that on your own, there is a lot more required because you have guests coming sometimes every day, new guests, and you're managing cleaners and all of the items that you would have to, um, reorder, keep stocked. So it's a very hands on asset. Whereas a long term, say, buy and hold, where you have a long term tenant, that can be quite hands off once you've got the initial stages done, once the tenant is in. And once you figure that out, then you can start adding more assets to it, but ultimately, you get to a point where you can't scale, as we say. You can't continue to grow by managing it all yourself. And there was a book that I had read that was a huge game changer for me, and it was called Who Not How. And Who Not How is so good because it does talk about really finding the people who excel in the areas that you need, which opens up you and allows you to be able to excel in your strengths and your areas. Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy. That's the those are
There
the
we go.
authors.
There we go. We'll make sure to link it in the episode description. Victoria, now that we started talking about the types of properties, my next question would be, what are the most common ways to invest in real estate and make money through real estate?
The most common, I would say, would be the buy and hold, where you would purchase a property and then you would put long term tenants in place. So, tenants that would be over a year long. And
Mm-hmm.
you just hold on to that property and you let it accumulate in value while you're paying down the mortgage. And if you've done it right, the tenants are the rent revenue is covering the expenses plus a little extra for those rainy days when, the leaky roof or something breaks. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to it because it's not just about the utility bills. There's, vacancy that you want to capture. There's maintenance. There's um, property managers. There's a lot more that you want to make sure that you're capturing. So long-term buy and hold, but it has its disadvantages with that, which, I'm happy to dive into. But another one would be the short-term rentals. They like blew up with Airbnb, and you can get some really good revenue that comes in with a short-term rental. A lot of places have now put in policies and bylaws that are prohibiting short term rentals. So people have now pivoted to medium term rentals because you can do that. So if you have a guest that stays for longer than 30 days, then that can typically be acceptable when you're in a city with a bylaw for no short term rental. So definitely make sure that everybody's checking your bylaws before you go and make any financial decisions. But there are always little workarounds where you can stay in the lanes and make money and make some good revenue from that. Another way that you could invest flips. Flips are
Mm-hmm.
great. Buying a property that would be under market value and then fixing it up and then selling it for more than you paid and more than the renovation costs so that you can get a return. And you want to factor in realtor fees, you want to factor in all the closing costs, the buying costs, everything like that. This is not maybe as well known and depends on the area that you're in, but wholesaling real estate is another way that people can make money, and that often has no money required in order to do that. So you find properties under market value, and then you assign that contract to an investor or a buyer for a fee. So you can make an assignment fee, and somebody else will take over that property.
So wait a second. You found the property that is that usually a one unit or is that a building with
Could be
multiple units?
anything. It could be
Okay.
anything. Yeah.
So let's say I'm in Vancouver. So let's say real estate, as you probably know, is crazy here. Let's
Yes.
say I found a home in North Vancouver. What would I do in terms of wholesaling? How would that work?
If you found a home and it was under market value and
Hmm.
it's off mark, so it's not listed typically. So
Okay.
let's say you knew of somebody who wanted to sell the house. Well, you could put that house under contract for less than the market value. And if you found a buyer, so somebody like me, you could say like, "Hey Victoria, I know you're looking for a property in North Vancouver. I have one and this is the price." So you could sell that property to me at a higher price than you put it under contract.
Would that mean that you're now acting as a real estate agent and would you need to have a license for that?
No, so now you're a wholesaler because it's an off market deal. And so you're assigning it. There's like a lot of nitty gritty. So if anybody is interested in wholesaling, would highly recommend like doing that research and
Checking that out.
education. But you can put down on a contract whenever you're purchasing a property, and you could say something like, and or assigned when you're purchasing a property so that you can assign that contract to somebody else. So it's just
Hmm.
another example of creative ways that you can invest in real estate without any money and not having to do, tenants and toilets, as they say. You don't have to deal with any of the laborious parts.
I like that. Thank you so much for highlighting quite a few, I think, four options for us. If we were to look at these four, or in general at investing in real estate, what would be the two or three or maybe one that you would say is the best option for a beginner, someone who has never bought real estate before, for income needs, and who is just starting to get into, tip their toes into the water?
It's a really great question. I always start with anybody who's interested in starting out with real estate is to understand, what is your current lifestyle and what are your goals, because then you can adapt the type of property that you would want to get started into. However, if we're just going to generalize it, one of the easiest ways I would recommend, it's called house hacking. It wasn't even something that I had brought up, but I think it would be great for people, especially younger right now. It's purchase a property, even if it's a single family home, you can rent out a room. And by renting out a room in that house, it's going to help you pay the mortgage. And if not more than the mortgage, that's always the goal. But you can
Mm-hmm.
use the 5% down, so you could find a house, or you could find a duplex, even better, because then you get one space all to yourself, and then you could rent out another. You could get a bungalow and you could convert the basement. Often bungalows can be converted into great secondary dwelling units and hire contractors for that. It's you can have a small barrier of entry in investing if you can be savvy in the other ways that you can start to gather revenue. And eventually you could move out of that property. If it's a duplex and you're renting the other side and living in one side, you could move out of it and now you own a duplex and you could purchase another home for yourself and upgrade. And that's kind of how I did it over the, past 20 years.
I love it. And that thought, the fact that you are renting your room or your basement to someone, that money that flows in, it covers your basic expenses. And now, whatever you're making at your job or your side gig or your business, that is extra income for you. That just takes me back to Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant book, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
he teaches there. I like it. Thank you for
Yes, yes.
sharing.
I'll also just want to say, because I know your listeners are younger, and I know that they range in demographic, but for any of the younger ones, and anybody, to be honest, if if you don't have the funds even for the down payment, then if you have parents or you have aunts and uncles who are willing to lend or co-sign, it doesn't have to be gifted money. It could be money if you're going to rent out space in your room or get a duplex and rent out the other side, then you can be paying interest. That's what we do. I borrow funds and I can pay higher interest so that it's a win-win on both sides. It's never a handout and it's never a gift. Let's make it favorable for everybody.
Victoria, if we are going to look at the pros and cons of short term and medium term rental
Mm,
properties, I think that's a very interesting area. Here in Vancouver, I have quite a few people in my network who are doing that. As you mentioned, Airbnbs are very important. A lot of people come to the West Coast in the summer, in the winter, because they're not as harsh as on the East Coast. So, what are the pros and cons there for someone who might be considering that?
and I can definitely speak to that because I have done all of the above. And I want to say the biggest con out of the gate is that bylaws could change, and not to put all your eggs in one basket, because it might be fruitful in the time being. And a lot of people flock to short term rentals. So they purchase properties specifically for short term rentals. But then, say, Toronto or Ottawa, where I'm located, they went and they changed the bylaw. And so now the revenue that they can get is much lower. And this is where a lot of people are getting caught. I like to put exit strategies in place. So I won't buy a property that can't can't be, at the worst case scenario, a long-term rental or sold for profit. So those are the
Mhm.
two things that I try to put as my safety net. So make sure that you have a safety net whenever you're doing a short-term and medium-term rental. But the pros is amazing because you get a lot more control of your asset. Where right now we're having some challenges as landlords with long-term tenants because of the landlord tenancy board, where it's taking up to a year sometimes to get a hearing if a tenant's not paying. And landlords and owners are on the hook, and there's nothing that they can do about it. But when you have anybody that is a guest in your property because of the short term and medium term, well, they're not part of the landlord tenancy board. It's not, so they're under different regulations. And so you have more control of your asset during those times. You can also get higher revenue because it's on a shorter term. You're providing the furnishings. So, from a con point, it's a higher startup because you have a lot more higher costs when you're
Mhm.
starting to furnish a property. You have to also maintain all of the utilities as well as all of the stocking and the management of cleaners. So, it's a very in-depth role to play. There's a lot of risk, but there's high returns, which isn't that always the case? High risk, high returns.
Exactly. If we look at, again, at the same type of real estate investing, short or medium term rentals, I assume that hiring a manager who would take a lot of tasks off your plate, such as managing cleaners and rentals and all of that. What are the things to look out for when
Mm.
hiring a professional like that?
Great question, because I have had experience with students of mine or people that I know that have hired managers. Their fees are quite significantly higher than, say, like a long-term property manager. You're looking in the range of like anywhere between 18 to 25%. And so you really want to make sure that you have a good fit when you're hiring a manager because of all the intricacies, and also because ratings on Airbnb are vital. People just, really hang off of the reviews that you can get. And so if your manager drops the ball, it's going to sting a lot more because you don't have that control. Plus, you're paying somebody for that. So I would be making sure that I would ask for like a list of their properties that they're managing. And I would probably go in and do my own checks and read the reviews from guests. And I would ask them just, questions about how would they respond to this situation. I'd also want to know about what's the contract for and how could I exit that. So sometimes they want to hold you to 3 months, and that can be quite damaging if you're finding that you're not getting the right type of management and then to have to stay with them for 3 more months. So really take a look at the services that they're providing, the history that they have done for others. You can talk to other owners that maybe, get some reference checks going. And then also, what's that contract look like?
Victoria, for someone who is just maybe purchasing their first property, they're going to rent out or put on an Airbnb for short term rental, would you recommend them doing it yourself at first or hiring a professional?
For somebody like me, did it myself, and I went and I just right away bought these bunkies on a lake, and I created this glamping retreat, and I just like dove head first. But that's my style. Like, I figure it out as I go. I know how to pivot. I'm great at problem solving and a big action taker. If you're not that type of person, and that's why it's so, so important to do that work on yourself to identify, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What resources do I bring to the table? And what do I need? And if you struggle with making decisions and problem solving and action taking, then I would highly recommend you get support from somebody who can bring that to the table. But I'm a big proponent of, learning through experience. And I became a better investor because I understood exactly what it took to manage Airbnbs. And so when I hired a property manager, I knew exactly what my expectations were with that property manager. And now, now I'm in the hospitality business. So I own a boutique motel. And so it's really evolved from Airbnb to actual like hospitality. And I'm so grateful for the experience that I had. And I would never have had that had I not jumped in head first.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because we recently had an episode with a chartered accountant, and we
Mhm.
talked about how you really, as a founder of the business, as the business owner, you need to understand how bookkeeping works, because you might hire a bookkeeper for yourself, but if they're making mistakes and you don't really know how to oversee that and you don't really know what happens there, the chance that you will miss those mistakes and lose potential tax benefits or money that might be flowing out of the business is very high. So it's very similar to real estate, from what I understand. And I am a big supporter of that idea as well, to really know, at least on the basic level, what is going on in the business. My next question for you, so we've talked about, you really need to evaluate your personality, your lifestyle, in order to understand what real estate investing type works for you, what property to go for. Let's say now you've done all of that and you have an idea of what you want to go for. What are some of the things to consider doing before you actually buy the property and make that leap?
Yeah, it's, I mean, so important. So I love that because it's all about, clarity, which is your own personal assessment, and then knowledge, the tactical knowledge that you need in order to take the action, and then the confidence to be able to do it. And so from that tactical knowledge perspective, I I teach a framework that I love because I'll break that down because it's really kind of walk you through those steps. So it's called PROFIT. It's P for personal assessment. R would be for run the numbers. So that's the next phase that you need to understand how to run the numbers in order to identify, is this even a good deal? People
Mm-hmm.
put, let's say it's a duplex, just to keep it simple. A duplex is on the market and somebody is asking $800,000 for this duplex. Depending on where you are, that can be quite common. Well, if they're only making maybe 1,000 a month each side and the interest rates are at 7.7, then you have to know that that is not going to be a good deal. So you want to understand what that looks like to run the numbers. I use calculators at this stage because I can plug in to everything I need and then it shoots it out for me. And so it's really just getting familiar with expenses, the revenue that comes in, the mortgage, and then anything else that you should be keeping aside for those rainy days that we talked about. So after you've done running the numbers, O would be for offer, like actually putting in an offer, where to find the property, negotiating terms that meet your needs, and then putting that offer on, hopefully getting accepted. And then we're moving into,
F.
what is it? F, thank you. Financing. So, how are you going to even finance this property? Because not every property is financed the same. If you're doing a short term rental, might be more challenging. In the long term, if you're going into commercial real estate, some people love commercial real estate. If you're buying units that are over 5, now it's considered commercial as well. You don't have to have like any retail in that. So there's a lot to it from the financing perspective. And just because one bank says no, it doesn't mean that the other is going to say the same. So knowing to keep pushing through and working all the angles that could be in order to finance that property, and even diving into private lending, getting
Mm-hmm.
private money. I financed a property within 4 days once, like from actual, like landed in my lap to close that property because of being able to use private funds. And that's just the beauty of it, is that once you get to that level, you can do it very quickly. Of course, we
We've
don't
actually,
expect
sorry to interrupt you, but we've
that at
actually done
all.
an episode in season one with a private lender, and we talked about getting private money for real estate. And the good thing about that, I just want to highlight, is that you have more room for negotiation versus when you're talking with the banks. So, for anyone who might want to listen to that episode, head over to season one. I think it was episode 5 or 6.
Nice. Absolutely. It's endless. That's the, I guess the message is that it's endless opportunities when you know where to look for them. The other one would be I. I think I'm on I now, FI, is
Yes.
the investigation. And what that means is, like, now your property is under contract, you're going through the financing process, but you also need to investigate the property, because just because they seller tells you that this is the revenue, this is the condition of the property, you can't take that at face value. So you want to investigate it. You want to see what the actual numbers look like. You want to look at the lease agreements. You want to have a home inspection completed by a professional who is, unbiased to be able to tell you. So there's a lot of things to the due diligence. And then if everything is good to go, the last is the T, and that's just about building your team. So who do you need in your team? A real estate lawyer. You need a realtor if you're working with realtors. You have to have home inspectors, appraisers, property managers, contractors. How do you build those teams so that you can be successful? And so that's how we've packaged it up, is just to make it from like A to Z in real estate investing from start to finish.
Thank you for sharing that formula. I feel like I have memorized it. And now
That's it.
when I'll be
Yeah,
thinking about real estate investing, I'll think about that profit formula. And
I love that.
obviously, all of these um, profit, 6 letters, are things you need to do to close the deal, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Perfect.
That you can
Victoria,
apply over and over again.
exactly, exactly. Victoria, is there a formula for success in real estate investing? We just talked about a formula for signing a successful deal and offer. Is there a
Mhm.
formula for success beyond that?
I would say, if I had to sum it up, it has to be resiliency. Because real estate investing, as people are experiencing right now, because we're on the downturn of the market, is you need to be resilient in real estate investing. It's not always going to be plentiful. And you have to ride the wave, and you have to be able to get back up. You have to learn from your mistakes and keep pushing through, because it's all about the long term wealth. There are ways that you can make money pretty quick with real estate investing, but that's not the norm. The goal should be that slow and steady, long term accumulation, boring, where you just hold on. And that's what we're doing right now. It's just about survival, and it's holding on, and it's making decisions that are smart so that you're not over leveraging yourself, and that you can see to the future, that you're anticipating the market cycle that's happening. But the resiliency is the key, because if you don't have resiliency, then it's going to be a tough ride.
Victoria, because we touched based on education just now, are there any other resources you can share with our audience, those beginner real estate investors, to help them get started?
Absolutely. And I mean, you do not have to pay for education to be a real estate investor. If anything, I've shown that for, the past 17 years, I didn't even have a network, let alone education on it. However, it will get you there quicker. But I would recommend, for people who do not want to pay for education, podcasts just like this. I mean, we've dropped so many good nuggets that could just plant a little seed in somebody's mind of like, maybe I'm interested in that. And then, so if there's anything that I've talked about today for any of your listeners, hold on to it and then go research that. And then you can start to build on your knowledge in a certain area. It can be very overwhelming, so I wouldn't try to be looking at everything, but just focus on one thing at a time. Podcasts are amazing. There's some really good Canadian podcasts here, because you want to make sure that if you're going to invest in Canada, that you're following Canadian market trends
Yes.
and policies. And we have different language for things compared to the US. The other thing that I would highly, highly recommend is to network with other investors. Social media is an excellent place to start, and you can connect. Investors love talking about real estate. So reach out to investors, or just follow them quietly and see what they're talking about, see what they're doing, or find networking events. I host a women's meetup here in Ottawa. It's called Invest Her, and it's completely free. And I just have women every single month, between 35 to 50 women show up talking about real estate. And it's so inspiring and empowering to be surrounded by women who are doing things that you aspire to do. And it also normalizes it, because it's like, oh, you're sitting beside someone who's building a subdivision. I can do that. Like, if she can do that, I can do that. And it starts to plant those seeds of hope into your mind, and it normalizes the behavior. Books, so many books out there. And then ultimately, there's education programs that you can take, that you can actually have mentorships and coaching so that people like me who have the experience and knowledge can guide you. And you can learn from the mistakes that we've made along the way, and you just want to make sure that you have that good fit, because everybody's different, coaching styles are different, programs are different, different price points. So really taking that time to make sure you have that good fit with that person if you are going to spend your hard-earned money. But investing in yourself, to be honest, is infinite. Like, the
The
returns
best
that you
asset.
get, it is the best asset. Took me a long
Victoria,
time to realize that.
yes. Victoria, I mean, but you've come such a long way. Victoria, I'll definitely make sure to link your personal resources in the episode description.
Right.
Victoria, the two questions I ask every guest to wrap up is, what is financial freedom to you?
Mm. Do you know, I get very specific about picturing, first of all, because my whole life has been with the military. My father was in the military as well. So I was born into a military family, and then I joined at 18. I have been told where to go, what to do my entire life. Financial freedom to me is about that freedom to make choices without any limitations. So if I want to do something or go somewhere or buy something, that is the financial freedom. But more specifically, as a mom, I really think about my son, and I think about, where he might be anywhere in this world, and that my husband and I can join him or support him at a moment's notice and travel and have our good life, but then be able to drop everything and just come to the rescue. So I get very just motherly about financial freedom. And yeah, I think it's important to have that real strong why anchored in, and it gets me through the hard times. It gets me through times where, I question if this is the direction for me, and then I think about that why, and it's like, okay, keep going.
I feel like you almost answered my next question, which
Oh.
is, what do you think women should do to achieve financial freedom?
I would add taking full control and responsibility of your future. I think that too many people, and it can be women predominantly, that really rely on others to guide them through it. And that is not acceptable anymore. We have access to the same resources, and we, if not, are more equipped to be able to be collaborative and, you know, network and get support and, band together. But you need to be fully in control of your actions and your future. And if something hits, like if you hit a roadblock along the way, do not let that stop you. Find a way to go around it, go over it, pivot. But we can't let the excuses hold us back anymore. We have to take full control.
Thank you for that, Victoria. You shared so much valuable information today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sophia, this has been fantastic. Your questions, everything. I'm really honored to be here and the first real estate investor. So I love that.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode. I hope you found it useful and valuable. And if you did, please make sure to share it with your family and friends and whoever you think might find it useful. Also, sharing it on your social media is a great way to help spread the message about In Her Wallet podcast and help us grow. If you haven't left us a review yet, please make sure to do so or support us through Buy Me a Coffee link in the episode description. As always, I want you to give yourself credit for showing up for yourself and your future, because every time you do that, you increase what's financially possible for you. With that said, I will see you next week. Bye.